We are one, a single consciousness. And I had a download the following day. It was like a brief poem because I asked, the universe, God, what had happened? And he said, look, this is the download I got was like a poem. Okay.
Mm.
So it was in the beginning was the one, but the one was alone and he wanted to play.
Hi, Soul Family, and welcome to NDE Talk. This is the second episode, and NDE Talk is a podcast that I created to kind of bring together NDE interviewers, researchers, and NDE experiencers so that we can come together and start putting the puzzle pieces together regarding near-death experiences. I'm your host, Haji, and our guests today are AJ Parr and Lamont Gates, who are both podcast hosts of NDE podcast hosts. So, welcome to the show, AJ,
Thank you for inviting me, Haji, and it's a pleasure.
and welcome, Lamont.
Thank you very much, Haji. Good to see you again.
Great, great, great. All right, so we're going to jump in, and we're kind of going to just do like a round table where one person asks a question, and then we all answer it, and then we move to the next person, and we'll just do that until we've got it all. I'm really excited about this. I feel like something's going to come out. Like some questions going to be asked, some questions going to be answered. That's going to just rock the world. So I'm going to start with the first question, and I'm going to hand this to AJ Park. Well, AJ, do you want to go first, or you okay
Yeah,
with?
go ahead.
Okay,
Whatever you.
okay. So I'm asking a very difficult question for people who have researched NDEs, and you're going to hear it right now. My first question is, what is your favorite NDE experience and why? And then we're each going to close with how we got into this or what our ultimate goal is in being in this space.
Well, there are many NDEs that I would like to mention. However, lately I researched a lot about a case that took place in 1984. This was a 7-year-old girl who drowned, and her case was the first scientific, scientifically studied case in the world. So I interviewed the doctor that treated her back in 1984, which is Dr. Melvin Morse, and I also interviewed the little girl who was 7 years old back then, and I got both of their perspectives. And she drowned, and she was 3 days in coma, and the Dr. Melvin Morse revived her or resuscitated her because her heart had stopped and she had stopped breathing. She apparently was underwater for 20 minutes. So they thought that she would not make it. And after he revived her, she did not gain consciousness. She was sent to another hospital. And 3 days later, she woke up. However, Dr. Melvin Morse didn't know about her. And a week later, this little girl came to the hospital where she had been resuscitated for a checkup. And Dr. Melvin Morse saw her in the hall, and she looked okay. And according to him, first of all, she was supposed to die or she was supposed to suffer from brain damage. She was okay. So he got near her and he said, look, Crystal, you probably don't remember me, but I treated you when you drowned. And she said, hey, mama. She was with her mother. This is the doctor with the beard that treated me after the other doctor. And he was surprised because apparently she had no consciousness. So he asked her, look, what do you remember about the drowning or being in the swimming pool? He didn't mention the word drowning. And she said, you mean when I met the fatherly heaven and Jesus? So after this conversation, he was a skeptic. He don't believe in near death experiences. This was like a new topic. So he started meeting with her, and he heard her story, and he turned into a believer because this girl had had no religious formation. Their parents were Mormons, but they didn't really practice anything. And she described going through the tunnel, meeting the light, meeting a woman who came and was like her spirit guide, seeing her dead relatives, being in a place that many people describe like a meadow, which is like heaven, being asked if you wanted to return. She didn't want to return, but then they made her think about her mother, and she returned. So she had all the characteristics or the commonalities pointed out by Dr. Raymond Moody in Life After Life. So this case was really interesting, and the fact that I managed to interview them, and the fact that it was the first medical studied case, really impacted me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And then just to close up with that whole moment, what made you come into this space? Like, what made you start doing what you're doing now with NDEs and the podcast?
Well, I had a near-death-like experience. I don't know if I stopped breathing. I suffered from asthma all my life, and I also was diagnosed with sleep apnea. And one night I woke up in the middle of the night, and I was in this dark void. They call it the void, this dark place. It was pitch dark. I could not even see my hands. I raised my hands to my face and I couldn't see them. And it was really scary. And all of a sudden I felt a presence. And I was right. I heard a voice say, surrender, all is one. So I don't know why, but I obeyed, or I simply, surrendered. And I felt my chest expanding. This is a feeling of emptiness in my chest expanding. And it grew larger than myself, larger than my house, larger than anything I could ever imagine. And all of a sudden, it was like an explosion, and I appeared in the middle of like a star. I could see up, down, to the right, to the left, in all directions at the same time, but I was not in the middle. There was nothing in the middle, only this sensation of emptiness. But I could see all the rays of light in all directions, and I had this feeling of oneness. Uh, I don't know how long this lasted. I didn't remember my ever being alive or having a human body. I thought I was, I didn't even think. I was overwhelmed by everything. And when I woke up, when I got back, I appeared in my bed. I woke up, or I don't know. I took a long breath, and I said, "Wow, what just happened?" And I still felt that I was one with everything. So I got up from my bed. I pushed my hand against the wall, and I could feel my hand pressing against the wall, but I could also feel that I was the wall pressing back. So I had like this double consciousness, and this lasted like 2 or 3 days. It faded out gradually, and since then I I believe that we are one, a single consciousness. And I had a download the following day. It was like a brief poem, because I asked, the universe, God, what had happened, and he said, "Look, this is the download I got was like a poem." Okay, so it was, in the beginning was the one, but the one was alone, and he wanted to play. So he divided himself into two and gave number two amnesia, and thus the game began. So this was like an explanation, not only of the creation of the universe, but of spirituality in general. But I had no one to talk about this because this was in 1991. So I was really, I didn't know what to do with that. There was no internet. There were some books, esoteric books mostly, or books, by Carlos Castaneda and, the classics. But I had no idea of near-death experiences. I had no idea about anything, and it took me many years to understand. I started studying different religions, and until I met a woman who had had a near-death experience, and she also went to the void. She also merged with the light, and that's when I'm a journalist, so that's when I decided to interview people. That's what
I,
makes
I'm
me
like,
continue.
wow.
That is
Just wow,
very
wow, 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 wow.
fascinating. Yes, very fascinating information right there.
Lamont, did you know
Thank
his
you.
story?
I did not. This is the first time I'm hearing it. Actually, I was going to ask him, but you beat me to the punch. I'm glad I heard it though.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I am sitting here like the whole show is over. Forget it. I'm done. I don't need anything else. I did not know that you were an experiencer and had such a fantastic experience. My God. Oh my God. It it does something. I mean, okay, well, I'm not going to talk about this too long, but your story is beyond amazing. And it does something for
Thank you.
people. Because like right now I'm in like a lowish kind of feeling. I'm feeling just like humanity, and I'm done with this and that, whatever. And so the idea, and this is something that I've been saying in a lot of my shows as people talk about their experiences, that I said, I feel like this being that we call source is looking to create a family. Like I always liken it to the Pinocchio and Geppetto story, So it makes sense now, and it actually makes me feel less annoyed or angry or upset about being alive and being here if that is the case. Because if it's like if we are helping ourselves and entertaining ourselves, or you know what I mean, like if we're supporting a bigger cause, then it makes it each day not so painful to me. You know what I mean? It makes me want to wake up in the morning and say, okay, if not this, we'd be this big massive light in darkness, just steering into darkness, into the abyss. So we're here to do something, to keep it entertained, to help it learn, to help it grow, and to show it love. I
And
love it.
and I have heard a similar theory, or rather, a similar experience, a concept to what he just stated concerning the beginning of this source. One near-death experiencer sent me an email about his experience, and he received very similar information. Although it wasn't in the form of a poem, he said something to the effect of this entity that we call God, this massive light source, divided itself into massive other smaller light entities and gave them autonomy. And with that autonomy, they began to co-create with this bigger light source, the source that we call God. And so here we are, right? It decided to create universes, galaxies, ultimately planets, and life on the planets, and to incarnate into those entities and begin the lesson, the school of life, as we call it.
Right. And it's also something that different spiritual paths mention. Hermes, the Hermetic schools of ancient times, they had the seven laws of the Kybalion. And the first one is called the law of mentalism. All is mind, and all this is taking place in the mind of the creator or source. So that more or less explains everything. The Hindus also mentioned that we are like dreaming. We are dreaming this reality, or co-creating this reality. But the transcendental reality, or the cosmic consciousness, is something else. It's oneness. So there are many versions of the same story. And I also think that's the basis of the teachings of Buddha, Krishna, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
He did mention, that I am one with my father. My father and I are one.
Yes, yes. He said, I am, Father, I am one in you as they are one in me, referring to his disciples. Yes.
Right. That's
Mm.
more accurate.
Like the Russian, is it the Russian doll?
Oh, yeah.
So we can clearly keep talking. I want to make sure we stay within the time frame. So Lamont, thank you so much, AJ. Literally life changing. Lamont, jump into your favorite, and then briefly, because we did this already, briefly how you got into this space.
Yes, thank you very much. I think mines will have to be one of them. As AJ stated, I have so many that I really love, and they all, when they come together, they teach that central message. But one off the top of my head I can think of was a gentleman by the name of Derek who went into the hospital to get a procedure done. Something went wrong, and he ended up having a near-death experience. And his was a very wide-ranging near-death experience. He had several characteristics, as AJ stated. I can recall off the top of my head him being in a place of darkness with dark entities towards the beginning of his near-death experience. He said there was this long line of individuals, and all of them had the same thing in common. They all had sociopathic tendencies. And he said you could feel that energy rubbing off of them from a mile away. All of a sudden, he was whisked somewhere else, and he was posed the question, "Do you believe in God?" And he wasn't really strong in faith at the time. He muttered something to the effect of, "I believe in being a good person." He said all of a sudden a light beam flashed to the left of him, and it began to start his life review. And in this life review, he can see himself as a child watching TV. And on the television screen, he saw those commercials where it talks about the starving children and the flies are flying all over them, and he was looking at the TV, and he just started bawling. His eyes just started bawling from tears. He started crying and wailing because he felt so much sympathy for those children on the screen. Then the life review changed, and it showed him at Halloween, kids coming to the door. He didn't have enough candy. So what he did was after he had went trick-or-treating, he started giving pieces of his candy out. And then the next kid came, gave another piece of his candy out, and the next kid came, so on and so forth, to the point where he had no more candy left because he had given it out to everyone. So the central message there was when he said being a good person, that's exactly what he was already fulfilling by filling the sympathy for those children who were poor in Africa by handing out his last piece of Halloween candy that I'm sure he waited all week to go trick-or-treating for. He was then shifted out of there to see a friend who had passed away. This was a deceased friend, and she had another message for him. He had a son who had died previously, years ago. She kind of pointed in another direction, and another beam of light lit up, and there was his son playing on like a Ferris wheel. And he couldn't believe it. He was just out of his mind, surprised. And he asked his friend, "Can I go over and see him?" She nodded her head, "Yes, you can." So he went over and spent this time with his son that he was missing on Earth since he had passed away. And he missed him so dearly. I mean, I can recall him grabbing a picture. He started to tear up while he was telling the story. And he turned around and grabbed a picture of his son and put it up on the screen. And I was able to see the child myself. And you could just see the joy in his face. You could hear it in his voice. And I think to me that was so impactful. The combination of his sympathy, his empathy, being told in this near-death experience that was the right way to be, that was the right action to take when someone is struggling, having the sympathy for them, and to also be shown his deceased son. A lot of people who have near-death experiences, who have someone who was deceased, a lot of times they don't get to see that loved one. I mean, I remember interviewing a gentleman in Sweden who took his own life because his grandparents, who he loved dearly, had departed, and he wanted to know where they went. So he followed them by hanging himself. He didn't get to see his grandparents for whatever reason, but this gentleman did. So it was a very heartwarming and heart-touching near-death experience, and that's the one that comes off the top of my head. As I stated to you earlier when we did this show, or about a month or so ago. I got into this because I was given a secondhand near-death experience account in 1988 when my teacher, fourth grade teacher, walked to the head of the class and said that a student's mother who was in our class at the time had undergone surgery and it went awry and she ended up having this beautiful heavenly positive near death experience. Fast forward after that, I remember reading a book that I was helping a nun adjust her bookshelf with, and I grabbed a book that had something to do with the afterlife. I opened it up and random page, and it read, I was moving quickly through a dark tunnel, and I remember throwing the book back on the shelf, thinking, "Oh my goodness, this is what the pastors were talking about in church. This is hell." Obviously, that's not what the tunnel is. Later on, over the years, I began to get involved with religion and spirituality. Came in contact somehow on the internet with Dr. Raymond Moody's a classic, Life After Life. I read that book, learned more about near-death experiences, learned what that tunnel really was, which was just a transfer from the earthly realm into the spiritual realm. And in the year 2020, I started my podcast because I decided, you know what, I think I want to start interviewing some of these people. And so here I am.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Lamont.
That's
And I,
great.
yeah.
So you started in 2020.
Correct. Yes.
Wow, that's a long time.
It seems like a long time. It was really only 4 years ago, though.
Well, yeah. I've only been doing this for less than 3 years. So
About the
4
same
years is a
time.
long time for me.
Yes, yes.
So my favorite, it's hard, like you guys said, it's hard to pick a favorite, but it's actually someone I have not interviewed yet. I want to interview them. And AJ, I think you just interviewed her, Norma. Um, I mention her NDE a lot in passing, like when I'm talking to strangers, which I do a lot, and I'm trying to, share the ideas and understandings of the NDEs. I always mention hers without question. She is one of the NDEs that I mention, because I think hers is incredibly important due to the fact that she saw her past lives. So I
Yeah,
really
I
like
was
when
going to
people.
mention her, I thought about
Okay,
her, but
see, she's one of those stories that, because I feel like this is something I've said on my channel. I feel like once all of humanity understands that we have been here before, that we've been in each other's shoes, that we've been every color, every sex, every situation, good, bad, ugly. Once we understand that we are each other and we are one, that's going to change, or at least push this, whatever we're in right now. This 3D is going to push us to 5D, 6D, 7D. I think that is one big knowing or understanding that it takes to start moving forward. And so her story, where she says, I don't know all the specifics of, can't remember all the specifics of her story, other than that she had passed out in the elevator and that she was taken to the hospital. And in the process of seeing that she had not completed her life mission, which she apparently has now. Like, she's done some really cool work with frequency and sound in the prison system and helping people there. But in the process of seeing all of her past lives, she saw that at one point she was a slave girl and, so scared of the master coming with the whip. And then, she comes out of that thinking, not so surprising. Like, you're a person of color, you're like, okay, I was a slave, I can see that. But then all of a sudden, another screen comes up and she's seeing herself as a slave master with that whip. And I'm pretty sure that had to be the most shocking thing for a person, of color to see, like, wow, like we really are just playing these different roles. Like, what's going on here? So it has always been a surprise. That has always been just like off the charts for me. It's something that I think everybody has. If you have not heard of Norma's story, you definitely have to. I think I'll put AJ's interview with her at the end of this video. Take a look at it. It is one of the most spectacular NDEs out there.
Norma
And then,
Edwards. Yeah, I interviewed her as well. Hers is really great. Yes.
so I will put both of you Norma's interviews at the back of this. So how I got into this was a spiritual awakening. Around the time that COVID happened, a little bit after, I was having a lot of spiritual situations. And I literally kept hearing, not hearing like audibly, but kind of like telepathy, hearing the letters NDE. And I was just like, at first I ignored it because I'm me. But then I was like, okay, what is this? Like, why am I hearing this? So I Google it, and lo and behold, NDE comes up. I started researching them. 2 years into researching them and getting so excited about them, talking about them with anybody and everybody who would listen, I am talking to my mother about another one randomly. She goes, "Oh, I had an NDE when you were born." And I was like, "Huh?" And so she then goes on to explain to me that they had given her too much anesthesia when she was pregnant with me, or having me, and she had her whole Jesus and some Egyptian woman situation pushed down a slide back into her body and then gave birth to me. So I am connected even further with NDEs apparently. So I'll leave it at that because I want us to be able to have more questions. So
Well, that's
you guys,
amazing.
yeah.
That's amazing. It's also amazing that you heard the letters NDE before you had actually had an idea of what they meant.
Had no idea what it was. So yeah,
So that's
I've
like
been pushed.
a calling. Yeah, you received a calling.
There's a reason for the season, in other words.
Yes, yes. All right. So AJ, if you'd like to ask the question a question of your own for the team.
Well, since Lamont has been doing this more than any of us, what was it like 4 years ago when you started? How did you get your first guests, and who were they?
So my first guest, thankfully, 2020, we're well in the mid or even the tip of the advent of the internet. So you had Facebook groups actually where people were discussing near-death experiences. And so I joined a few of those groups and I said, you know what, let me see if some of these people will be willing to share their accounts outside of the written form into an interview form. So I would email a few of them, and lo and behold, a number of them were willing to actually give their account orally. And that's pretty much where it began. The show started off audio based. It wasn't even video at the time. It was just audio. And what I started seeing immediately as I was interviewing guest one, guest two, guest three, I was starting to look at the similarities, right? The connections that these people were having, and the fact that they were so spread out and apart and different from one another, all walks of life. People from different continents, people from different racial backgrounds, sexes, sexual orientations, political affiliations, religions, etc. Some of them, many of them were actually atheist and agnostic. So I said, this is completely fascinating. And it totally matched what I had already read concerning Dr. Raymond Moody's book, Life After Life. And as a matter of fact, the subtitle of his book is, I believe, The Similarities of Experiences. And that's exactly what I noticed off the get-go while I was interviewing these people. But to answer your question, yes, many of these people were already sharing on Facebook group sites, and a lot of those sites were private. So you really had to join the group and they had to let you in. They had to trust that you weren't going to come in and, poke fun, ridicule, because a lot of these people get a lot of that too, especially when they come back from a near-death experience. Sometimes the first person they tell is their doctor, and the doctor's like, well, let me give you some more morphine, or let me take you over to the psych ward and have you talk with the onboard psychiatrist over there. So that's why a lot of these groups were private. But the fact that they were willing to jump off of the written form and come on to a platform where they were going to be interviewed and potentially seen by hundreds or thousands of people showed how brave they were.
Yeah, they sure were brave. And yesterday I was, or Sunday, yeah, I was in Ian's sharing group. And there was this guy who had an amazing story, but he had only shared it in the Ian's groups and with his family, but since his family never believed him, and apparently he had problems with several girlfriends that thought he was, crazy. He did not dare to share his experience openly. So I told him, look, it's like stepping out of the closet. You have to be brave. You have to tell everyone who you are. And after you do that, because he says, no, but I lost a lot, too many relationships. I lost friends. I've had problem finding a romantic relationship, and I told him, look, once you tell everyone about your experience, once you step out of the closet, you will meet new people who have also had these type of experiences, and you will probably find someone like you know, friends, relationships, whatever.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think it's
Yeah.
important.
And just to add to that, what he probably doesn't realize is there are groups for this. People who are just dying to hear his story and give him the support he needs. If he could just go on to some of these Facebook group sites, and he would see there's this outpouring of support for people like him and his stories.
Yeah, you're right.
And I'm so glad it's changed in that way, that it's become more mainstream. It's not completely there, but there, like you said, there's a lot of people who are like hungry for these stories, especially people who have lost loved ones. Those are the ones who,
Yeah.
primarily want to hear more about this. I sometimes wonder, like, I mean, I don't know if it's a weird thought, but I literally sometimes not wish, but just wonder if I could connect with some of these old sanitariums or, crazy houses and get some of those stories. I'm sure that they have written and recorded stories of people that they were saying were crazy, but we're just having these STEs, OBEs, and NDEs. And I mean, it's probably a wealth of stories. Can you imagine?
Yeah, but I think
Mm.
they once you're in an asylum or a nut house, if you're not crazy, you end up being crazy because of the drugs, the way they treat you, the isolation.
Yeah.
So it would be kind of hard to find those stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are estimated to be millions of near-death experience accounts worldwide, and I think we're just hitting the tip of the iceberg from the people we contact. There's so many stories that we probably haven't even heard yet that will put the piece of the spiritual puzzle together even more. If there was just this universal place where everyone could go, where millions of people are just lined up waiting to tell their story, that would be great. And I also wonder about ancient near-death experiences. I know there's a gentleman by the name of
Mm.
Dr. Shushan, who does research in this area.
Yeah, I
Because
interviewed him.
yeah, because I'm certain that this is just not a modern phenomenon. I'm sure this probably goes back to probably Homo erectus. Of course,
Yeah, of course. Hey, of course.
of course,
It,
we didn't have resuscitation therapies like we have today, but a lot of times people resuscitate on their own. So I'm certain
Mm.
that there have been accounts in prehistoric times.
yeah, I interviewed Gregory Shushan, and I asked him that. I told him, look, I believe that people had near death experiences in prehistoric times, and I also believe that they saw light beings, and that they did not say, "Look, it's Jesus." They had no name for it, but I think it's the same light being we call Jesus. Why? Because he told me that in ancient Egypt, in one of the books, it's not the Book of the Dead, but it's another old text. They mentioned that after you die, you meet a light being, and it was supposed to be the god Ra, the god of the sun, but it was a
Mm.
light being. And also, he said in Mesopotamia, the Sumerians also had some writing where after death you are judged by a light being, and they gave he gave me the name of the god. But I think, look, if you die, if you have an near death experience and you're in ancient Greece, you would say that light being is Apollo. And
Yeah.
if you're in Egypt, you would say that it's Osiris, you know?
Yeah,
But
and it begs the question, if these prehistoric near-death experiences occurred, did they give rise to later religions?
well,
I
you
was
know
just
what
about
I
to say
think?
that.
I think that in prehistoric times, their society was basically divided into small tribes. And there was always a medicine man, the witch doctor, the guy who talked with the spirits. I'm sure that those guys had near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, and STEs, because those were the guys who communicated with the afterlife. And I'm sure that NDEs is a natural phenomena sent to these prehistoric people so they could, talk about being a better person, to learn about spiritual ideals, because a lot of people, when they return from an NDE, they actually become a better person. It doesn't matter what religion they are, but they end up like, being more Christians, not because they follow a church, but because they don't want to do to others what they don't want others to do to them. They try to be more helpful. I don't know why, but many people who have had a life review and have seen how they make others suffer, when they come back, they are more careful with their actions, more altruist.
Yeah, and in ancient times, religion and spirituality was just a way of life. I mean, most people believed in gods or a god, whether you were monotheistic or polytheistic, etc. It was just woven in to society. You look at ancient Mesopotamia, as you spoke about earlier, it was woven into their system and their government system, right? The kings only ruled because the gods gave them power to rule. When we move into the 19th century with the advent of the Enlightenment, that's when we start moving back away from spirituality and things like religion. That's when science starts to take over, and the scientists begin to say, well, what do we need religion for? If I can prove that the sun is this many degrees, what do I need with a God? And so we started moving away from that. And here we are today trying. It's a balance now. It's a struggle. You got religion versus science now. Now you got this spiritual movement of near-death experiencers kind of eclipsing all of that. We think we have a long way to go to get worldwide acceptance, but I think near-death experience accounts are getting there. People are starting to see that, true love. You don't have to sacrifice science for spirituality. And really, it's about helping one another and coming together and showing unity and showing how we can peacefully coexist. Which
Right.
a lot of times science and religion puts us at odds with.
Right. Another thing that I've noticed after talking to many near-death experiencers is that when they come back, they do not follow a specific religion. They may be Christians, but they do not go to church. Or maybe they do, but they don't follow the church. They follow a direct relationship with the spirit world, with Jesus, or with whoever they want to follow. Some people establish a communication with the ascended masters, others with God directly, angels. And I think that's more authentic than, reciting the Bible and saying only through Jesus you will, you will reach the Father.
Yeah.
I was reading an NDE recently where the woman actually said that she had asked God. No, she didn't ask God. Like, she was shown from God the Bible, and it said, I'm going to show you the words of God in the Bible, and the whole Bible was empty for the most part. Like, they were going from page to page to page, and there was nothing there. And every now and then she would see a couple of sentences or a word here or there, but overall, like, that's what she was shown. And I was just like, wow. So she clearly took from that it's man-made. Like, most of these religions are the result of somebody having an STE, OBE, NDE, some kind of spiritual experience, and then it gradually starts to become a man-made thing. And
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Go ahead,
Okay, so
AJ. Did you want to say something?
Well, I wanted to say that Jesus never wrote any book. Buddha never wrote any book. Krishna never wrote anything. And that the ones who wrote those books were their followers many years after the original guide had died. So,
And I've always said that, the epistles section of the New Testament, and you can, when you read throughout the entire epistles section, you will see that not all the apostles and disciples were on the same page. So that tells you right there, a lot of them were giving you their personal philosophy and personal theology based on the best way they could interpret the teachings of Jesus.
yes.
So, as you guys can see, this is a very meaty topic. We could talk forever. I want to make sure that Lamont gets his question in. We'll each just have had one question, for this episode.
Right.
But Lamont, ask your question of AJ and myself.
Yeah, so my question centers around near-death experience after effects. As you know, as AJ stated earlier, many near-death experiencers come back with several after effects. It could be the lack of fear of death. It could be, higher empathy levels. Some of them come back with anomalies caused by electromagnetic waves. For example, they can walk past something and cause an electromagnetic static disruption to occur. Have you, AJ, specifically in your research, have you interviewed anybody who has shown you some of these extraordinary after effects? And I'll give you another example. And I would say an ordinary after effect would be the lack of fear of death, right? You're coming back from this, you know that there's life that continues. So when you return, you say to everyone and you say to yourself, you're convinced life continues, so I'm not afraid to die. However, there are people who say things like they can read people's minds afterwards. They have psychic abilities or precognitions. Have you ever contacted or come in contact with anyone who's proven some of those extra ordinary after effects?
Yes, I have interviewed people who claim that they have healing powers, and also people who came back and could see the dead people. Some of these have become mediums. And I also heard several who said that during their NDEs, while they were out of the bodies, and they see their families and they go here and there before entering the tunnel, they can read their other people's minds. But once they come back, they can't. Okay. I have met several who cannot use watches because they break or they have problems. For example, PMH Atwater, Dr. PMH Atwater, she had 3 near-death experiences, and she cannot use a computer for long. And she has problems with electrical equipment. Norma Edwards also has certain problems with electrical equipment. And I interviewed a guy who had problems with electrical equipment, and one day he heard that NDEs had the same problem, so he went through a life regression and found out that he had an NDE when he was a kid. So yeah, that's another reason that makes me believe that in the past, people who had NDEs became the healers of the tribe and the wise men and the leaders, actually, and the founders of the spiritual path.
What about you, Haji? Have you come into contact with anyone who had an after effect that was extraordinary?
Well, I've definitely interviewed people who have had after effects. I don't know that I've seen them proven, but I definitely have had several that are now working as mediums. I have had several that are working as psychics, so there's something connected there. And then we also have the recent, I haven't interviewed him, but I am in contact with him. I added him on Instagram, Kenneth Leith, the one who, to some extent, predicted the Trump second assassination or first assassination. He literally, he recently was on Passion Harvest, he added some things to his story. So he's foreseeing a civil war, a possible civil war in the United States, and a whole bunch of other things. So he saw a lot of the future. So yeah, I've come across that. The thing that I can say that's a little different, because obviously we've all had, guests that have had these superpowers, is that when I interview some of my guests, and it took me a while to realize this, I start feeling, because I'm a sensitive myself, and I feel like I have had, especially as a child, a lot of the symptoms of someone who had an NDE. And I did have some situations where I could have been near death. So I'm waiting to see if I remember an NDE from my past. I also had issues with watches, which I didn't understand at the time. I could never wear a watch, and I would get so upset because I liked watches. So a lot of those kind of weird, energies type situations, but no quote unquote NDE that I know of. But I am a sensitive, and when I speak to some of these people, I start feeling either divine, what I consider divine love, because I felt that many times in my life. So it's overwhelming to the point where it's hard for me to continue the interview. I literally feel like I'm gonna pass out a little bit. And then I've had times recently where I had someone channeling, and I just had a hard pressure, extreme pressure on my brain as soon as they started channeling. So I can tell when someone's the real deal. I don't know what they're channeling or what they're surrounded by, but when somebody is extra hyper, whatever, I can feel it immediately. I can tell the difference between a regular interview and somebody who is something else is happening around them.
And I would love to see a actual widespread research on those who say they have these extraordinary near-death experience after effects. And that's something I don't think that's been done. Bringing them in and kind of testing these powers to see exactly how strong they are, and if they still persist. We can do the interviewing, but
Yeah.
I guess it would take someone else to actually do this particular kind of research.
Like
That's
a doctor.
Maybe we
Okay.
can bring Bruce Grayson out or something.
You did not mention, Lamont, if you met people with powers, and who are they?
I have interviewed several of them, and they've all said very similar things to what you both said, but I have never been able to actually test this. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm the interviewer. I take your story, but it's slim to none that I'm actually going to go out and test. Whether you have a healing after effect or not. I will say this though before we close: the gentleman I interviewed in Sweden, he said he came back with all types of gifts and so on and so forth, and I vividly remember before we went on the air. I was trying to get his position right, and he, was kind of staring at me through the screen, and I was looking left and right. And when my eyes met him, I got hit with the biggest dose of deja vu that I've ever had in my life. I couldn't even explain it. Now I've had deja vu several times. I'm sure both of you have had it too. I'm sure most people have had deja vu. But why I saw this image before, I can't explain it to you. I don't know if that was his after effect rubbing off on me. I've never had that with any other guests except him, but I thought it was absolutely fascinating that I said to myself, I saw this somewhere before. I saw this guy staring at me like this before somewhere. I can only describe it as intense deja vu.
Wow.
Wow. All right. So in closing, if you could either just share something that you feel that, a message you have for humanity or for people who have had NDEs, or, whatever you think is appropriate right now, whatever's calling to you, and then how people can find your channel, and if they have an NDE, how they can contact you to share their NDE with you. And we'll start with AJ, Lamont, and myself.
Yeah, well, I think you guys are doing a terrific job, and I think we are all trying to carry out a mission. In my case, it's a self-imposed mission. I did not hear a voice saying, "Hey, you have to open a YouTube channel." But I think it's an interesting way of researching and helping others. I have heard people thanking me for the videos I have put out, and people who have lost their fear of death. I personally, I'm not afraid of actually dying. I am afraid of suffering before dying. But other than that, once you die, you apparently you're in another dimension. There is no end. So it's going to be fun. People love it so much that they don't want to come back.
Yeah, and I think my closing statement will be the same as I always state. You know, you may be feeling minute, you may be feeling minuscule, you may feel that you don't matter, you may feel like you have no purpose, but listening to these near-death experiences, even short blade of grass in a field, a massive field of grass, has a purpose and a meaning. So imagine someone with two hands, two legs, 2 feet, two hands, a brain, someone that can help save someone's life. Imagine the potential you have. I would say keep the faith. And if you don't have the faith, which we interview atheists all the time, keep the faith in humanity. Keep the faith in yourself to know that you are a part of something bigger and that without you, believe me, someone is going to be missing something somewhere.
Great message.
Awesome, awesome. And I'm just going to very quickly just say that one of the things that I hear the most, and we even spoke about it here in today's podcast, is that we are one. We are one, we are one, we are one, and we are eternal. So if you can just remember those two things, I think that's going to help you get through your days. And for those who have not shared their NDEs, if you have an NDE out there and you're out in the closet, you know, please feel free to start coming out, even if it's like Lamont said, just audio, you know, if it's anonymous. We need to kind of start coming together with these stories because it does help the collective. It helps us to heal. One of the biggest things I've also noticed with a lot of these stories is that they say we're here to love and to heal. And to heal, we need these stories. These stories are healing. So I'll leave it at that. This was great. You know, we didn't get through a lot of questions, but this topic can go on and on and on for you. Because it really can. And I thank you guys for doing your part to make this happen and to make it more mainstream so people feel comfortable sharing. And by being comfortable sharing, more people are benefiting from these stories and their lives are changing and being enhanced. So I thank you guys for your work.
Great. Thank you.
That will do. Thank you very much.
Yes. All right. Well, you guys have a blessed 11/11 and, you know, may your best dreams come true.
Thanks a
All right,
lot.
man.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
Good to meet you all. Bye.